Hey there, my flesh and blood friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again. Now, today we're joined by Arthur Mills, who has been both figuratively and literally dominating the Northwestern USA competitive scene for the last several cycles. He's done so on one hero, Azalea, and he joins us today to share his recent list, as well as share his thoughts and expertise. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey there, my flesh and blood friends. Welcome back to Dice Commando and Go Again, a fabulous cast for a special one. We're joined today by Arthur Mills. How are we doing, my friend?
Not too shabby. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too shabby. I will echo that. Back from work. It is a Monday when we are shooting this, so many days of work left to go. Are you looking at anything this? So we're shooting this in the middle of RTN season. You've got RTNs on the plate this weekend, I assume?
Oh yeah, so busy with RTNs coming up. We have just draft RTNs for the rest of the season. So there's 2 this weekend and then 1 more on the following Sunday. So very busy.
Gotcha. Have you secured your spot? Have you gotten a top 4 this season?
Unfortunately, no. The closest was that top 8 over at the Gongai RTN, but 3 more chances. So still got a chance to get in.
Sure. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's kind of a good lead in, I guess, to the point. So part of the reason we're talking with Arthur is he's been, shall we say, dominating, pun intended, the competitive scene up here in the Portland area. I should say the greater Oregon area, Northwest, I suppose, since you said you went up on Azalea, and you've been pretty loyal to that hero. Last season, you were in the top. You ended up winning 1 PQ outright, and then you did a split of 2 PQs with some team members, which was also pretty impressive. We can talk about your team here in a second. But have continued to do that on Azalea, and then you top 8'd the RTN 2 weekends ago now, which was pretty impressive, I think, in a meta that's not necessarily super favorable to Azalea. So I was pretty impressed with that. But
Right.
get your take on that as well. So before we get into it, can you tell us about your team, Ancestral Alliance, who during the last PQ season destroyed the Northwest?
Yeah, absolutely. So it just started out as, me, Adam, Hamilton Sutherland, and Austin Brill were 3 of the big regulars over at Kraken Cards down in Corvallis. And we actually started really practicing a whole lot for the Battle Hard in Portland not too long ago, where they had the Team Blitz event. So when we learned there was Team Blitz, it was almost like an obvious pairing, or triplet between the 3 of us. Like, hey, yeah, we need a team of 3 people. We're like the obvious choice, I would say. So we show up there and we see everyone wearing their cool jerseys, and we just thought we could totally do something like that. So we came up with a team name. I think Adam took that one because he's the Katsu main, and there's the Ancestral Alliance going along with some of the Katsu cards. So he took that up for us. And yeah, we just started practicing really hard for ProQuest season. And so as you mentioned, it was Adam and I we'd made top 2 at the first 2 CC ProQuests last season. And we just prize split both ways, which I know wasn't necessary for the second time when he already got the official win before. But we're just teammates, we're friends, so we thought, why not go ahead and do the prize split there. And then at the third ProQuest, I'm only made top 4, sadly. Although it was sad, that was the Kraken ProQuest, is the one that I wasn't able to make it to the finals. And then over at the last ProQuest, all 3 of us made top 8, and that was the one where I got my true official win, getting there undefeated without needing to prize split.
Yeah, I mean, that's an very impressive season, not just for the team, but for you as well. Or I should say not just for you, but for the whole team. So let's fast forward then to last weekend at Gongai. How do you fit? How's Azalea looking right now?
So I think she's actually pretty good. Probably not, top tier like she was in the previous meta, but there are definitely some Azaleas stealing away wins here during RTN seasons. It's definitely a lot harder now, thanks to Guardians getting a big power boost. Victor in particular has been especially annoying for me. I haven't quite cracked that matchup. Bravo definitely is one of my tougher matchups as Azalea, but that's something that I at least have a game plan for. It might not be always the most consistent game plan, but at least I have one there. But Bravo is just something I haven't quite cracked. Dromai, of course, is still
Hmm.
a big thing, and that's also very difficult. The other one to shout out is actually a very interesting one, which is the Prism matchup. And so that's what I lost to in top eight, played by my friend Justin Salmon, which actually we have a lot of lore with that particular matchup because Justin's also from Corvallis. And so we've practiced that a ton. And previously it's almost seemed Azalea favored. Like I kind of beat up that guy with the special anti-prism tech being, as we'll see in the deck list, Tar Pit Trap and Sleep Dart. I think with those two cards, the matchup is probably fairly even between Azalea and Prism. But at the last second, Justin came up with some nice, hot new anti-Azalea tech just for me, and he showed that off pretty spectacularly in our top eight game. So he was able to take that away from me right there.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. Now, before we go into your deck list, which we will do, um, why Azalea? Why do you enjoy playing her so much?
Well, to be honest, I actually did start out wanting to play Lexi a long time ago. I feel dirty even saying that I wanted to be a Lexi player, but so this was pre-Outsiders is when I picked up the game. So I wanted to play Lexi, but decided that she was a little too expensive. This is the first time I've ever played a trading card game. I really did not want to spend, $400 on both a Tunic and a New Horizon. And so at some point I started looking for another Ranger just because I liked the Ranger playstyle and came across, the memes with Azalea, haha, Azalea Colt, the worst hero in the game, no living legend points. And I decided just on a whim, why not try her out during a commoner armory? So I bring her in, just build her a random deck list I found online. And that was actually my first ever armory victory. So I just felt so hyped up getting to beat some pretty experienced players in commoner and them saying afterwards like I've never seen anyone play Azalea before. So it was just so fun to have that be my first win on this new hero. And that's, the rest is history. Just never really felt like playing anyone other than Azalea after that.
Yeah, I mean, fair enough. All right, well,
Mhm.
I'll tell you what. Let's go ahead and bring up your list. We'll show the overlay first, just so people can know that we're working off the official list. But then obviously I made up a nicer little graphic here. So what I'll do is I will kind of go through the list, just reading it down. And if you could walk us through, as I say the card, if you've got something interesting to say about it, sideboard versus special matchup, anything like that.
Yeah, sure thing.
So we start off with two battering bolts. Is that a sideboard card?
Yes, definitely. So the
Mm-hmm.
battering bolts and the CNCs, those pretty much go together as being the four poppers for the deck. I think four is a good number of poppers, especially for Dromai and Prism. Any more than that in the deck feels very, very clunky, in my
Mm-hmm.
opinion. I'd rather not have more than one popper in my hand. I did consider other poppers, but now that Kassai and Dorinthea even have been showing up in the meta, all these new warriors, battering bolt can be absolutely clutch. I've definitely had games where hit a warrior with a battering bolt and it just rips away all of the cards in their hand because they were all being non-actions. So I think that is definitely a very high priority popper for this warrior infested meta.
Mm-hmm. And Boltyn shot. No one plays Boltyn. No, so obviously full rainbow Boltyn shot. Everybody knows why there. Actually, to be fair, in Azalea, I suppose there could be an argument for not running a full rainbow. But you've landed on the 9, and that's worked out pretty well for you. Or do you always run the 9?
Oh, it's definitely always a nine of doubling in with the three rain razors. So this is an idea that I think has been piloted by the legendary Levi Rauch from a long time ago, from pre-Outsiders, where it's just an incredible amount of damage
Mm-hmm.
output between Boltyn shots and the rain razors, allowing Azalea to go wider than anyone ever would expect a hero with the dominate keyword to be. And it's an especially important tool in the fatigue matchup. So against Bravo, if they're just playing a light fatigue or even Dorinthea, Axe Boltyn, any sort of fatigue matchup, being able to go three wide with a Rain Razors, maybe end on a Codex, is just so incredibly impactful. And also, even without the Rain Razors, if you just have a Boltyn shot in Arsenal, play a single buff to give it the go again, and you inflict just so much mental damage on your opponent because now they're thinking, does he need the reload trigger off of the Boltyn shot, but he still has a Death Dealer, he also still has Bullseye Bracers, what if he has a Codex, is he going to E-Strike, CNC after the Boltyn shot? There's just so many playlines available with that one card.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. All right, so in 2 drill shots. So 2 drill shots is it's a very popular arrow. So why'd you land on 2 here?
So 2 is just because I'm trying to find some balance between my 1 cost and 0 cost arrows. For the 2, that's just because I have that 1 extra endless arrow there, which I'll talk about in a second. But I can definitely see a world in which we go up to 3 drill shots. There has been a lot of talk in the official, unofficial Fab Discord, the purple Discord, in the Azalea chat. People have been going off of Enlightened Strikes, maybe replacing those with even more arrows. So I can definitely see running 3 drill shots now that there's so much armor. And from my experience, if I'm able to land very early drill shots, like on Guardians and Warriors, the matchup just becomes so much better. Being able to take away the armor that they would love to save for a very key dominated Red in the Ledger, a dominated Remorseless, where I've shot off their D-React. So just stripping away all the armor that's present in the meta right now is super duper important.
Sure, and a lot of times an early drill shot will suck out armor even if it doesn't hit, right? Because it's value. So yeah.
Exactly. And they have to weigh the pros and cons of, do I block the drill shot with the armor, which, is exactly what I'm trying to get with the drill shot. And I'm just making them waste the armor right then and there instead of saving it.
All right. Now you mentioned the endless arrow. Talk us through the 1 copy of that.
So this came from Brody Spurlock running 3 endless arrows at the Realm Brawl a few months ago, which I thought was very weird at the start because it's definitely a very Lexi kind of card. Like Lexi abuses endless arrows so well. And so I decided to just try 1 out for a week of testing. And that enables actually a whole lot of very useful playlines. Like one of them being actually, if maybe I'm going first or something, or maybe I have a Knock the Death Whistle in my hand, but I don't have enough resources to get a dominated Red in the Ledger while being able to hold an arsenal when during a game state where I feel like holding an arsenal is very important going into the next turn. So what I could do is just instead play Knock the Death Whistle, grab an Endless Arrow, shoot it as hard as I can, knowing that it's going to hit and the Endless Arrow will come back, allowing me to arsenal it at the end of my turn. And also there's some really cute mid-rangey style play you can do with Endless Arrow where just put it into Arsenal, and on my opponent's next turn, I just block out with all the remaining arrows in my hand, keeping my buffs, playing the buffs, shooting the Endless Arrow. Hopefully it comes back, get to Arsenal it, block out with my extra arrows, keeping the buffs, and just keep repeating that same mid-rangey playline. So it's definitely a very, very useful card. I can maybe see running 2. I don't think I would ever go up to 3, but 1 has been very, very good for me so far.
And the reason you don't favor more of it is just because of no detrimental on hit. Is that why? Or
Yeah, no real detrimental on hit. So if I'm wanting to do more 0 cost arrows, why not throw in an extra drill shot to strip away armor, which is very, very important. And there's also some cases where the Endless Arrow returning to hand is actually kind of a hindrance. Like if I play it off of a Codex of Frailty, I actually don't really want the Endless Arrow to hit because it messes with the Ponder token that I get from the Codex. And so even if I shoot it with a Premeditate, now I'm giving myself an intellect penalty essentially by having now the Endless Arrow in my hand, plus the card I'm going to draw off of the Ponder.
Yeah, makes sense. All right, 2 E-Strikes.
Yep, E-Strike, again, just a very flexible card. It used to be a 3 of, but now I think I do want some more disruption. I think some newer Azalea lists have cut them out completely in favor of even more 1-cost disruptive arrows like Hamstring Shot I've been seeing as a new thing, and that's something I'm also going to consider here. But E-Strike just helps you fix your hands sometimes. It's also just a very nice thing when you shoot it, Boltyn shot with Go Again, into E-Strike, draw a card. Sometimes you can just hit it for 7. It's just such a flexible card. There's a reason why that card is pretty pricey. It has always been since its inception.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, next we have 3 fatigue shots.
Yes, the fatigue shots, the MVP of this meta, which has Guardians and Kayos and Levias running all over the place. So this card just really, really helps when Red in the Ledger doesn't quite get the job done
Mm-hmm.
against these brutes. Where sure, if I can Red in the Ledger a KO, and that's when he just plays Swing Big. Or maybe I play a Codex of Frailty, and that just lets them get their Send Packing or their CNC, their Swing Big right back, and they just hit me really hard after I play a Codex. But I can instead Codex for a fatigue shot and just completely kill the power of whatever attack they bring from the Codex. So it's something that can be better than a Red in the Ledger, or at least is slightly worse than Red in the Ledger in a lot of cases in this meta.
Okay. Yeah, makes that's actually kind of interesting. Because going into infecting shot, this is the one thing that really surprised me at the list is that there's only 2 copies of infecting shot, which is a very popular arrow.
Oh yes, so infecting shot that used to be a 3 of just because the damage is insane. You can shoot it for 5, possibly 6 with an aim counter, plus the extra 2 from the blood rot. But I think at this point, we just really need that disruption a lot more.
Hmm.
There's a lot more decks that can go head to head with Azalea in like a mid-rangey kind of game plan. Even KO with his incredible aggressive potential, plus just being mathematically efficient. I just really would rather try to knock him down a peg with Red in the Ledgers or fatigue shots rather than infecting shots. But infecting shot still definitely has a place, especially in fatigue matchups where I do really need that damage. And even shooting the infecting shot for 6 as a pseudo breakpoint in some cases, like in the late game, has been just always very, very important.
Mm-hmm. So then next we go into the Lace series. So there's a full boat of 9, right? Obviously Blood Rot, probably you're playing most of the time. Inertia, I think most of the time, and then Frailty probably in specific matches.
Yep, that's exactly right. Frailty is the one that gets sided out most often. Of course, we're throwing that in just for the warriors, maybe into people who can do Blood Rot with the 2 claws. Blood Rot, that just goes into every single matchup. The 0 for 5 damage potential is just too good a rate to pass up. Inertia, I've been favoring a whole lot more. So that's something I used to not run just because it clashes with Seek and Destroy, because you can always layer an Inertia token with the Seek and Destroy effect such that the inertia token pops off first, so the opponent takes all their cards and puts them at the bottom of the deck, rather than having to destroy them with the Seek and Destroy effect. But so many heroes just really pop off. They're able to hold a 5-card hand, with that card being an arsenal. So being able to consistently deny that arsenal target is very, very good in this meta. So a lot of the time I am running at least 2 laces or lace with inertias, but sometimes I do just go all in with 3 of those plus the 3 seek and destroys.
Okay. And then Premeditate, no, I don't think that one's a secret. That card's really, really, really good.
Yes, that card is just kind of insane. Being able to overextend on some cases with a tall dominate and still ending my turn with an arsenal. That card will just stay in Azalea forever, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. And then good old staple, Ravenous Rabble. Any thoughts there? It's just good.
The card's just good. Yeah, it helps you find dominates sometimes. It's great into Dromai because even if it comes in revealing a blue, that still kills the important dragons like Cromai and Kyloria. So that's also going to be a thing for a while. I have considered cutting it at least like in the Victor matchup because it can be weird in Victor if I just play a Rabble and he just plays a test of strength, just completely ruins the card that I might have been looking to find with the Rabble, and he just draws an extra card for free. So Rabble can be a little sketchy in that matchup, but overall it's just another extra go wide option for Azalea in most matchups.
Yeah, that's actually a really good point about Victor. Yeah, that's actually really fair.
Yeah.
With Ravenous Rabble, well, yeah, because it's only a 5, I guess. Fair. Yeah.
Yeah, one of the many reasons why Victor is annoying, basically, is coming to how he can play around that card. Yeah.
One of the many. That's, yeah. All right. Read the Glide Path card is absolutely phenomenal. Have you ever tried running the yellows as well?
Yeah, that actually has been a consideration. So pre-Outsiders, yellows were run in pretty much all Azalea deck lists. Actually, I was considering like all night long going into the final ProQuest of the that week, like between this and the one on Sunday, I was debating on whether to change something into having 2 yellow Read the Glide paths just to really help, or at least hopefully help with the Victor matchup. Because against Victor, I'm hoping to get a lot more dominate than I would normally want to do against even, say, Bravo. So yellow Read the Glide paths would allow you to do that. An alternative to yellow Read the Glide path would even be red Scout the Periphery, which isn't an opt, but at least lets you look at the top of your deck while still being a 0 for 3 as opposed to a 0 for 2. So if someone is including yellow Read the Glide paths, I think that's completely reasonable just to get some extra dominates. And because it's a yellow, you're pitching it, which likely guarantees you some more buffs in the late game, which is your problem in fatigue matchups. And for fatigue matchups, you're not really worried about arrows, which is something I hear a lot of non-Azalea players say. As Azalea, you're never worried about running out of arrows in fatigue. You're more worried about running out of buffs. Having yellow buffs like Deadeyes, yellow Read the Glide Path, helps you like smooth out that buff curve in the end game.
Okay. Oh, that's a good point. I was actually going to ask if you'd swap out Deadeyes for them, but if you're looking for, that's fair.
And another thing there is that with the Deadeyes, which we can skip to that here, I guess, because
Sure, yeah.
Deadeye, that's another +3 buff in yellow, but most importantly is that it's a block 3. It's a block 3 non-attack, which is great for Kassai to be able to block those without triggering the +1 from the Saber or the hot streak effect. So just having more block 3s is very nice. And of course, every so often you get to have an aim counter, and the Deadeye effect just completely destroys your opponent on that turn cycle.
Yep. All right, red in the ledger, probably self-explanatory. Does it actually? Are you running this in every match, or are there matches that you're not doing it in?
I think it is worth running in pretty much every match, just because with the arrows I've chosen in my inventory, some of them don't really do all that much, in certain matchups. Like, sure, Red in the Ledger doesn't do too many things against Bravo. It prevents him from using the Dominate effect from his hero ability. It can be decent into Victor, because a lot of Victors now are running things like Rouse or E-Strikes. So being able to save a little bit of damage here and there from those. But overall, it's just such a good card. I mean, there's a reason everyone always hates this card in most matchups. We're running that forever, of course.
All right, the one released the tension. So where are we playing this, and against who, and how are we playing this one?
Yeah, so this one has always been a point of contention post Outsiders for Azalea deck builders, because the release attention locking out defense reactions from Arsenal, you don't always know if you get value out of this card. And sometimes this happens to be the buff that you want to play, and your opponent doesn't have an Arsenal, so now it's just a 0 for 3. It's basically just a Nimblism, doesn't do anything else. Or even if your opponent does have a card in Arsenal, and maybe they just Arsenal it, you can't really tell, was that a D-React? Is that their pummel? Is that a power card they're going to hold for later? You just don't know how much value you're getting out of it. But it's been really performing a lot in this meta, I think. So in a more recent deck list, I have gone up to 2 release attentions, just changing some of my buffs around. And I want to say even at Gongai, there were probably 3 moments, 3 games total out of all that I played, where that single release attention locked out a big D-React on a turn where I needed an arrow to hit. And if they were able to play that D-React, then my turn would have been a whole lot worse. So it's really overperformed in my expectations.
Okay. 2 copies of Remorseless, another very popular arrow, but you're running 2. So why the 2?
Yes, just because it's kind of similar to the infecting shots, where damage seems a little less useful nowadays for Azalea, and I want to focus that disruption. So in fact, even into Kayo, which is probably my scariest aggro / mid-range matchup, I've been cutting out Remorseless completely in that matchup, and instead going all in on as many disruptive arrows as I can. But of course, there are some heroes where that life bleed effect, like Katsu or Fai, just really, really hoses them. Even the Azalea mirror, I did play an Azalea mirror where I got Remorseless, and I played 6 cards, or 5 or 6 cards. So I took 5 or 6 damage from that, which is just an incredible rate. But it's more used, I think, at the moment for the anti-defense reaction text, kind of like with the release attention.
Mhm.
So if I really want an on hit to go through, like Seek and Destroy usually against a Guardian, because I suspect that they have like a staunch response in their arsenal, then I might knock for a Remorseless with the Seek and Destroy, hoping to just get that staunch response out of the game.
Hmm. Got it. Got it. And then, yeah, that actually leads us right into Seek and Destroy, which is one of my favorite arts. That's why it's the backdrop for this, right? But
Yeah, I've
great
noticed you
card.
use this card a lot, so
I do.
I can't really fault you. Yeah.
I do. And then two Sink Belows. That's obviously a sideboard card at that rate, I would guess.
Yes, definitely. Pretty much just for Bravo, actually. I don't think I run that into anyone else, just to help shut off a crush effect combined with the 3 target traps down there at the bottom. So that's a total of 5 defense reactions. I do like to run a slightly more mid-rangey style Azalea, so I do actually block a whole lot more than I think is people would expect Azalea to do. So I have run Sink Belows in more matchups previously. I've even dabbled a bit running that into Rhinar and Levia, but I think now with Send packing, running defense reactions in those matchups is a little less appealing. But it's just a good card. I also do get a lot of questions about Think Below versus Fate Foreseen
Mm-hmm.
for Azalea. People like to think Fate Foreseen just because of the opt, and Azalea, I care about the top of my deck. But usually being able to fix your hand, say if you have a hand of too many arrows or like too few arrows, maybe you have no arrow at all, being able to cycle out one of those cards that doesn't quite fit in your hand just to help smooth you out, make sure you aren't bricking completely on that hand.
Sure. Yeah, well, and one of the other problems, especially because you're running Death Dealer specifically, right, is even if you fate and you put that arrow on there, you're going to draw the card, right?
Exactly. Right. So sure you can like the opt is definitely very important for Death Dealer matchups. So you can choose to see like, oh yeah, I would love to draw this card. Maybe even you would like to draw the arrow if you have a Boltyn shot that you can buff from your arsenal or something. Or maybe that you want to dominate that arrow off of a codex. So like the opt is useful, but I think it's more useful to just make sure your hand isn't just all arrows or all buffs because that can be disastrous for you.
Yeah, fair enough. And then the reason you're running, because you said you were using it alone to defend, so that's why you're using Sink Below over top of like Reinforce the Line or something like that, right?
Right, because reinforce the line, I don't think that fits too well with Azalea, because you do need to keep one arrow in hand. So I
Mm-hmm.
imagine that you desperately need to block, but you only have one arrow, and so now you have to defend with that arrow if you want to get the reinforce the lines effect. So it's not quite that good. I would instead use defense reactions.
All right, fair enough. All right, and then Sleep Dart, 2 copies of that one in an ability heavy meta. Tracks.
Mhm. Oh yes, definitely. That's also been a big overperformer in the meta. I definitely see a world in which I run 3 of those. I actually have constantly switched between doing 3 fatigue shot and 2 sleep dart versus 2 fatigue shot and 3 sleep darts. But sleep dart is just an absolute killer into say Dromai.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost as good as the red in the ledger in a lot of cases, and it's one of the things that really, really helps in the Prism matchup. Like Prism he does so many things that really hurts Azalea, but the worst one is just getting her figments and those angels. If she's ever able to stack figments and stack them into angels, it's basically game over for Azalea. So being able to say, hit a prism with a sleep dart and say like, nope, you can't go grab your favorite figment. You can't start flipping these angels. Just really, really pushes down what Prism can do to you.
Makes sense. All right, so into the yellows, we've kind of talked about a few of these already. So Boltyn Shot, Codex of Frailty times 3. Now, there's no secret this card is good, but why 3 over 2? Have you tried the 2 ratio? Why did you land there? Just because it's hashtag amazeballs, or?
Yeah, because the card's busted.
Yeah.
Pretty much. The card is just kind of insane. It just enables way too many amazing play lines. The card just has an insane rate. You can do crazy, crazy, and very creative plays with the card. It's just such a fun card to play. Like, that's one of the reasons why I do like playing Azalea, is that card, Knock the Death Whistle, Boltyn Shot, they just allow for so many cool, creative play lines where you can shoot 4 arrows and do a little Lexi cosplay sometimes. It's just a good card. As long as this card is not banned, Azalea is going to be running 3 of these, I think, at least for the Death Dealer version.
Yeah, fair enough. Deadeye. So we talked about this a bit already, but it kind of leads me into one of my earlier strategy questions. How often are you actually finding success on the aim counters?
So it doesn't happen every game. It does happen more often the longer that games go on, because then if I start getting to my pitch stack, when I start having more blues and yellows, then I can actually start getting the effect. I feel like I have been getting the effect more often recently. I'm not entirely sure why. It could be that in a lot of matchups, because I really want disruption, I'm dominating arrows a lot more often. Because I'm trying to dominate arrows more often, like say with Knock the Death Whistle or that one sneaky Memorial Ground underneath the Deadeye, then maybe we'll have extra resources for the Deadeye counters just because we're later in the game. But it's definitely not every game. A lot of the time it is just I'm going to pitch it or I'm going to block with it. But every so often you do get that aim counter and you able to pluck out the best card in their hand, and that just saves you so much value on that turn cycle.
Okay, fair enough. Memorial Ground, I think that one speaks for itself. One copy of seems pretty standard in that. Rain Razors speaks for itself, and then Tar Pit Trap. Talk us through this one.
Oh yeah, so this is my personal thing, just because I played so much with Justin and his Prism, where Tar Pit Trap just completely hoses Prism, actually. Because it's the same reason why Sleep Dart is so good in a Prism, is that she's trying to get those figments out. She gets too many figments, I'm in trouble. So being able to say, nope, you're not getting a figment on this angel or on this herald, or if they play a Herald of Erudition, pitching a yellow card to give it go again, putting down that tar pit trap and saying, nope, sorry, you're not getting your 2 cards. And also, this is another way of getting around Herald of Triumph, because as you can see, my 4 poppers, they're all 6 power, and prisms are now running so many Herald of Triumph. So that's those 6 power poppers really aren't doing anything a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
But Tar Pit Trap gets around all of that completely. It completely gets around using Halo of Illumination to go fetch Figment of Triumph. So Tar Pit Trap is the true MVP and is actually far better than poppers in a lot of cases for
Mm.
the Prism matchup. And also, fun, sad shout out to Adam, my testing partner on Katsu. The card also just completely destroys Katsu. So, being able to shut off their hero ability when, without them expecting it. So if I sleep dart a Katsu, they at least know they're going into their turn without their hero power. But if I just suddenly spring a tar pit trap on them, that can completely destroy the game plan they were crafting for that turn. So tar
Yeah.
pit trap is my personal, favorite D-React for this meta with Prism around. And because Prism is so scary, I think that needs to stay in for at least some time.
Mm. Yeah, that's actually pretty dirty against Katsu because you can actually wait for them to commit to their line and then shut it down. That's pretty rough.
Oh, absolutely. My Adam hates this card, so the poor guy. I've destroyed him too many times with this thing.
All right. Good player in his own right, though, for sure. He's
Yeah,
done quite
absolutely.
a bit around. Blue Boltyn shot, we already talked about that. Knock the Death Whistle, that's an OG. That card speaks for itself. And then Spire Sniping is like the new blue favorite, I would think.
Oh yes, definitely. It's a blue. It blocks 3. It's an arrow. Being able to flip it and look at the top 2 cards. It's just so good. Of course, there are a lot of times when the correct line is to go for like loading a Spire Sniping, and then you find nothing at the top of your deck. Like you find maybe 2 buffs when you have no other arrow, so you have to shoot a very sad blue Spire Sniping at your opponent. But a lot of the time, you are going to get something useful out of it. So it's a great target to Arsenal a lot of the time. It's just a very, very nice card.
Mm-hmm.
Big fan of that.
And when you order, because you can order the triggers either way, right? So if you load it with dealer, you can either draw or you can look and draw. Do you usually draw first and then look?
So actually, no, you cannot order the triggers. That is something that a lot of people I see mess up on, even in the Azalea chat in the Discord. People constantly ask this question. You cannot order the triggers on these. And it's weird because it's also backwards between Crosswrap and Death Dealer. So if you load in Aspire Sniping with Death Dealer, you have to let Death Dealer resolve first, which means you
Okay.
draw the card first, then you look at the top 2. This is in reverse to Crosswrap. When you activate Skullbone Crosswrap, as part of the cost for the Crosswrap, you flip the card face up, which means you have to do the Spire Sniping trigger first to look at the top 2, then the Crosswrap resolves, and then you can opt. So
Okay.
there is no choice,
You
unfortunately.
just taught me something. I thought you could choose.
Sadly, no. I would love to be able to choose to look at the top two cards and then draw my favorite one with the Death Dealer, but sadly, no, there is no choice for those.
All right. Yeah. Well, fair enough. I mean, I was always so. I'm actually sorry. Next question I had for you is Ridge Rider Blue. That's something I still play in my Azalea. What's your feeling on that card?
So Ridge Rider is an interesting one. It can be a good card. I know that there are some red line, like your Cheerios, Azalea lists that are back to running Ridge Rider shot. I'm not too big of a fan of it, just because also in blue, if I remember right,
It's a two.
it is a two, yeah, as opposed to the three from Spire Sniping, which isn't too big of a deal when we're talking blue arrows here, but that is something. And also, I guess being able to have the Spire Sniping effect even when it's loaded in your arsenal is good, because Ridge Rider Shot requires you to put it face up into arsenal
I
before
see.
you get the opt. So
Okay.
Spire Sniping, you can do it both ways as opposed to just one way for the Ridge Rider Shot.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but to be fair, with cross wrap up, because it's only opt one on Ridge Rider, right? So it's effectively the same if it's
Mhm.
face down, right?
It is true. So you
Yeah.
still do get the opt there, but yeah, I just that extra one damage point can definitely be more useful. They are definitely close in value for those two things, because you can also say Ridge Rider Shot costs zero. So if you want some more zero cost arrows, you can do that. And also, if you're very scared of Victor, I can see throwing in some more Ridge Rider Shots elsewhere, even on this list. So it's not too out of the question.
I mean, Spire going deeper makes sense, right?
Mhm. Yeah,
Okay.
being able to look at two rather than just one, I think also that's definitely a big deal.
Sure. And then the weapon, obviously, we already talked about Death Dealer. The equipment loadout's pretty standard. But again, I back to the aims with myself and playing. I'm triggering aims so little. Is Crow's Nest worth the card slot, or is there something that you would consider? I mean, obviously, like Deadeye, there's no way to get the aim counter off Deadeye if you don't have Crow's Nest. So I completely grant that, right? But have you ever considered not running Crow's Nest?
That has been a consideration because one side, like freeing up a sideboard slot, is a pretty big deal. But I think that it's worth having the crow's nest in there because, again, every so often you will be able to throw an aim counter on something. So sometimes you'll get the Deadeye trigger. I probably have done it several times, during this RTN season. And also, don't forget the aim counter on the drill shot can also be very
Mm-hmm.
good, giving it piercing for a meta where there's so many people running armor. But there's also the lesser used feature of Crow's Nest, which is you can use it to give aim counters just to help cycle your hand. So maybe if your hand is terrible, but you need to like dominate an arrow, and you have too many arrows in your hand, you aren't able to get them out of there, you can just pitch one of those red arrows to the Crow's Nest, get it out of your hands to help prevent clogging up your hand going to your end phase. So I do think it's worth it also being able to cycle out your hand like that. Because again, if you are able to get that aim counter, every so often you just straight up win the game off of a Deadeye trigger. So I think having one sideboard slot that says sometimes you win the game, I think is pretty good.
I mean, I can't argue with that. Fair argument. We're on Tunic, Purge Grapplers, Cross Wrap, and then the Scalers. For Tunic, or I should say for the chest slot, if someone doesn't have Tunic, what would be your recommendation? Trench?
I probably wouldn't recommend Trench just because of the anti-synergy with the Skullbone Crosswrap, because both Crosswrap and Trench require your arsenal to be face down. So you would have to choose between which of those effects you want to trigger. Most of the time, you do want to trigger the Crosswrap effect. To give some credit to Trench, that is a way you can get around being hosed by Warmongers. So if you do get Warmongers and you have a buff in Arsenal, you can at least use Trench as an instant to throw that buff away and still be able to load an arrow and have at least something to do under a Warmonger's turn. But because of the anti-synergy with Crosswrap, you're probably better using Blossom of Spring
Mm-hmm.
as a replacement. I think it's perfectly fine like in Commoner. Like in my Commoner Azalea, I always use Blossom of Spring. It's no big deal there. So if you're looking for a budget CC list, I would also stick with that as well.
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, let's go ahead and hide. Actually, there's no real reason to hide the list. But next question I had for you is so Judge, Jury, Executioner, brand new card from the set. Amazing, phenomenal art. It's actually going to be the title art for ProQuest 5 coming up here very shortly. So I
I'm
know you're
so
going to
excited
be
for that. Yeah.
shooting for one of those mats. It
Oh,
looks real good.
absolutely.
But not in this list. So talk me through that.
Yeah, that's been a huge point of debate within the Azalea community. Like the card is awesome. The card art is so good. I would run it just for the card art almost. But it's one of those things that it's an arrow that's essentially a 2 for 5 in the Death Dealer list because it costs 1. You have to give it an aim counter for the arrow to do anything cool. So it's a 2 for 5 arrow. And the 2 cost is incredibly awkward. So even imagine a nice case where you have a Knock the Death Whistle. You can go hunt down that arrow, put it on top of your deck. You need to have a yellow or blue as well in your hand because you can't fire it off of a tunic resource because you need to pay for the aim counter. So that's already 2 cards out of your 4 just to find the arrow and then be able to afford that arrow. Then you only have 2 other cards in your hands to buff it up. So a lot of the time you're going to be shooting it for at most 11 dominate, which is still fine. It probably will connect in most matchups and you'll be able to take away their whole hand. That's really cool. But that's so many hoops to jump through when a lot of the time Red in the Ledger is probably doing the same, if not more, because there are cases where they have a card in arsenal, they have 1 card in hand. If they're Kassai, they can maybe pitch to gold. Their arsenal card might still be a source of go again. Of course, there's the other thing where they might be able to just E-strike you or something like that. So the card's cool. It's very good if it costs 1, which it does in like Sandscour lists. So for lists running the Sandscour Great Bow, aim counters are free. So that card is definitely amazing in that list too. But there's too many hoops to jump through in the Death Dealer list. So that's why it's not found at all here. I'd much rather just have more consistent arrows that I can fire off of a tunic resource while still getting their full effect.
Okay. Fair enough. So this is kind of the open question then for you is where does Azalea go in this meta? And then, I don't know, we've actually seen spoilers for the next set. So where does Azalea go next?
So I think Azalea is still very well situated in this meta. The Death Dealer list is still alive and well. I know that even I have been considering the Sandscour list a little bit, just because the Sandscour list, just with its ability to get dominate almost every single turn, that's very good into Guardian. So that's one way to get around Victor, just to have no more issues with him drawing additional cards to block wide turns. Being able to just dominate every time would be absolutely killer into him. But Death Dealer still puts up amazing value numbers, so you can still go to head with Kayo, even though he has also some insane numbers with Might tokens and Cast Bones, things like that. It's just really hard to beat drawing a card almost for free with Death Dealer every single turn. Being able to play off of the top card of your deck is also just so good. So I think she's going to be fine. Uh, with the new sets being potentially ninja base, I mean, Azalea's kind of happy with that, always having a favorable matchup into ninjas. If there's a new illusionist in town, that could definitely be scary. But even looking towards just the Pro Tour meta without thinking too much about the next upcoming set, I think she's also going to do very well there. If Prism continues to be an absolute powerhouse, then things could look a little bit grim. That a lot of Azalea people are very worried about the Prism matchup, especially if maybe I become so worried about other matchups I have to take out the tar pit traps, and then I might think Prism is almost unwinnable. But I think overall she's probably doing just fine.
Okay. And then Kano, obviously talk of the town, at least this week that we're shooting. AB2 is all you're running. That's another advantage of Trench, actually, to be fair. But with the number of yellows you have, AB2 is probably right. But how are you
Oh yeah.
feeling against Kano?
But again, Kano is a very weird matchup. That's a matchup where one of us is going to get blown up within 3 or 4 turns, most likely. The thing that's in Azalea's favor, despite having AB2, is that I'm definitely running those 3 Lace with Inertias and the 3 Seek and Destroys. So that's 6 sources of arsenal hate that I have for Kano. So if I'm able to continually land and stack those inertia type effects, he can't get his arsenal. He's down 1 card to go for his combo turn. So that's really the win condition for Kano. Can I still race him while layering those inertia effects? Because if so, AB2 is probably okay, as long as I'm able to race him down.
Mm-hmm.
If it takes too long, maybe if I have one bricked hand with too many reds in it, then I definitely just die. But it's a race to the death for both of us.
I mean, yeah, fair enough. He did. Kano's actually did pretty well. I haven't seen results. It's Monday when we're shooting this, so probably when we close this and go back to our internets, it'll be posted for the weekend. But we haven't seen it,
Of
or at least I
course.
haven't seen it yet. But we'll see. We'll see. But yeah, Kano is a thing for sure. All right. Well, as we start to wrap this up, first off, I wanted to thank you. You were very easy to schedule with, which is not always a thing. So I really appreciate that. And then wanted to give you a chance to give shout outs to folks or anything. So
Yeah, sure. Well, of course, shout out to my team, Adam and Austin. You're the best. Shout out to Justin too. All the practice time, even though you knocked me out of top 8. That was kind of rude, but otherwise, I guess he's a cool guy. Everyone at Kraken Trading Cards in Corvallis, my home LGS store. So, I mean, like I said, this is my first trading card game, and they took me in. It's been a wonderful, amazing place with all the new people there, and of course, just the greater community. So, like I said, I've just traveled up to Seattle to see some new players I never played with before. And I don't know why I might have expected anything different, but everyone up there was just as happy, cheerful, fun to play with as everywhere else. So the Flesh and Blood community is amazing. Shout out to everyone. Hopefully, let's keep that going for the rest of the competitive season.
yeah. Well, that's a great lead out. But actually, I wanted to ask you about Kraken. So that's a college town, right? Corvallis is a college town. How have you found the card gaming community in a college town, right? Obviously, you have people moving in and moving out, and you have fluidity there. You have people in a phase of their life where they don't, most of us anyway, don't have a ton of money. How have you found that to be? Like, what's your take on that? I know it's a kind of a generic question, but
Yeah, that's an interesting question too. So I've only been playing since December of 2022. So I guess I haven't been playing this long enough to have people actually like come and go.
mm-hmm.
Although there are some people who are seniors at OSU, so that day probably is coming where we might have to say goodbye to some folks, which of course would be very, very sad for me. But the money issue, of course, that's another thing, the hotly debated topic, of course, with like casual versus competitive players. So like we have actually gotten a big influx of new players over at Kraken recently. Like it used to be on CC nights, it would just be like 4 people, just the 4 serious people that I just mentioned. But we've been up to like 14
Mm.
on CC nights recently. So we've had a big jump in people slowly accruing cards for their decks. And because this is a bit of a money sink to get into, everyone's always happy to just lend out cards. So everyone's lending out cards, lending out decks even to new players. We've had new players just show up day one to a CC event and we say like, here, you can play my fully built Dash deck. Go ahead and take that for a whirl. So I think because everyone is so nice and friendly that it's been still fairly easy for people to get into the game without having to feel too bogged down by the competitiveness of it. But I think that's also where the commoner format shines. So I also want to credit you for putting up so much good commoner content, because that's another amazing way for casual people who may not want to spend $400 on a Tunic New Horizon like me when I first started, but still feel like they have a chance to like shine, come up with something cool, like a new build, and perform well with that.
Yeah, no, yeah, great point. Yeah, it's just I've because college generally has a memory of about 3 years, right? Because you come in, you're a freshman, you're still figuring everything out. By the time you're a senior, you're not really into meeting the new people anymore, right? So you kind of have like a 3 year overlap. So I was curious how that translated to a card gaming community where a lot of times people come in and out on a cadence even faster than that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, I guess it remains to be seen for a few more years. I guess the interesting part for me actually has been, so I'm a graduate student at Oregon State University. So I've had multiple of my former students come into the game store. Some of them even playing with us working at the store. So that part has also just been interesting to me. But one day we will start having some people cycle in and out, and that will of course be sad.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, anyway, just kind of a bonus question that I just thought of as you were talking there, Bolt.
No, sure, appreciate
Yeah,
it.
good chat. All right. Well, again, I want to thank you for coming on. Hopefully, everyone enjoyed this. If you did, leave us a comment and do all that good stuff below. And then, Arthur, I'll give you a parting shot before we get out of here.
All right. Well, it's just been fun. Thank you for bringing me onto here. It's a great time to talk about Azalea, something that I just love to do. Been just completely obsessed with this hero. So, yeah, thanks again for bringing me on.
All right. Well, good luck this weekend. And say it with me, my friend. Go
All right.
Commando.
Go Commando.